Here we go. Okay. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is something very hard-hitting and very prescient in regards to trans issues, which is why, unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that there have been literally no news stories on the subject, because the status quo of news reporting in terms of social issues is like transphobic, or at the very least not pro-trans. So let me see if I can't find the thread here. Let me search. So recently, you may have heard, if you're on Twitter, that a young woman by the name of Eden Knight died. Very tragic. She was a Saudi Arabian trans girl. And now I know what you're thinking, is that Saudi Arabia must be incredibly transphobic, right? You know, how does that work? Well, you're correct, and that actually played a part in her death. Now, as far as I understand it, she was friends with some people on the platform, on Twitter, some people that I know even. There's like a degree of separation between me through the people that I follow, and then they're friends with her. They were friends with her. Jesus Christ. Recently, some people were hired to basically pose as family friends to pick her up and bring her home at the airport, to bring her home to Saudi Arabia. I don't know the full context. In fact, I will go searching. You know what? Let me just read from the document. To whom it may concern, journalists, activists, friends, trans allies, and onlookers, hello. We are friends of Eden Knight, who was a trans woman from Saudi Arabia living in America. She was tricked by financial support from quote-unquote fixers, allegedly hired by her parents, into moving back to Saudi Arabia and detransitioning. So this, as far as I know, was written by Merrick and some other people who knew Eden and were friends with her. Eden was a funny, sharp, well-read, and concerned with making the world a better place. She stood up for marginalized people and regularly critiqued the conservative, suffocating culture she had left back home. This is true. I've seen some of Eden's tweets. In fact, I didn't realize that I had seen some of them until she actually had died. A lot of them were like the typical sort of young person biting humor that critiques a system that fucking sucks. You know, so pretty good stuff. Banger tweets. On the morning of March 12th, 2023, so just 2 days ago, Eden posted her suicide note to Twitter. In it, Eden laid out how she was manipulated into depending on people hired by her powerful parents to pose as friends, but whose actual goal was to force her to detransition and move back to Saudi Arabia. They succeeded, unfortunately. This morning of Monday, March 13th, 2023, Eden's family confirmed both her passing in Saudi Arabia and their identity. We are greatly disturbed by how she was treated. We believe that what happened to her was an unspeakable violation, and there must be consequences. Justice must be served. In this document, we have laid out some of the pieces of evidence that we believe tell Eden's story and expose the way she was failed and violated by her parents, by powerful American citizens willing to do anything for money, by a Saudi government official who posed as a friend, and by the U.S. justice and immigration systems that should have been there to offer her asylum and safety. Let me let you in on a little secret. You know how in 1984 there's the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Peace, and the Ministry of Love, which all do the opposite of what their name would intuitively suggest they do. There is a version of that in the real world. The Department of Defense is an example of this. They are in charge of all military operations, which in the case of the United States are almost always offensive, because we are a global hegemon. And another one is the, the UN UNHCR, the offices that are charged with handling the processing of immigrants and asylum seekers, often will be give some sort of name to suggest that. Really, what their job is to scour any existing documentation, if it does exist at all, for any sort of minute detail that doesn't hold up to the greatest possible scrutiny, and then deny people entry. The objective of having offices in these countries, in any country that deals with immigration and refugees, is to allow as few people entry to the country as possible. It is essentially, it is an excuse to be a to militantly enforce the borders of a nation state, is what it is. So the U.S. justice and immigration system, as horrifying as it sounds, was working exactly as it intended, as it was intended to when it denied Eden Knight asylum to stay in this country. In the same way that, the UNHCR and refugee immigration agencies in other countries systematically deny entry to people fleeing political turbulence in their home countries. But anyways, back to the main thing here. She deserved better in life, and she deserves better in death. With love and care, the Friends of Eden Knight. Make no mistake, her family does not care that she is dead. They can say God rests his soul all they want. The dead naming gives it away, like, super easy. Her family did not love her. If they really loved her, they would have supported her instead of attempting to exert extremely draconian and authoritarian methods of control over somebody who was clearly struggling and on the run. And of course, she was misgendered in death, on her death certificate as well, because the government of Saudi Arabia is also very, very transphobic. And to bring it back to something I said at the beginning, the news outlets that we have in the United States are also very, very transphobic, or at the very least, beholden to an extremely ethically questionable set of geopolitical interests, because they have reported exactly 0 stories. If I look up Eden Knight. Here, look. Dazed Digital. Never heard of this before. Reddit. Into More. Never heard of this one. No major news outlets, even local news outlets. Oh, great. Here's one. SNBC, and SNBC 13. Fucking, I don't even know what station this is. Like where that's from. Nobody's reporting on this. Nobody. Not CNN, not Fox, not NPR, not the Washington Post. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They haven't even graced it with, like, back page news coverage, which is absolutely shameful. Although, again, like I said with that segment about David DePape, quite frankly, if my assessment of the biases of these news journals that I'm referencing here, if my assessment of their biases is accurate, then they have nothing to be ashamed of, because they actually don't care that Eden Knight died after being forcibly detransitioned. You know, the New York Times, for example, they're one of those mainstream news outlets. They fucking jumped at the chance to write anti-trans opinion pieces that would defend the likes of J.K. Rowling. But once there's actually some hard-hitting trans issues in the media, like with, what's her name, Brianna J., and now Eden Knight, crickets. Absolutely nothing. And when I say crickets, I also mean that the details that they decide to leave out in the things that they do report. For example, every news outlet that reported on Brianna J's death very suspiciously reported that this couldn't have possibly been a hate crime, despite the fact that the only possible reasonable explanation for those events happening was a hate crime driven by ignorance in her peers. I can't help but feel that I'm not being terribly coherent. But like I said in the tweet, I'm too angry. I am very, very angry right now. I remember when I was in high school and early in college, I branded myself a pacifist, as is the sort of easy political label that a lot of people feel comfortable applying to themselves. And of course, you know, I think it's good to acknowledge that violence is bad. But with every day that goes by, every one of these stories, with every Brianna J, with every Eden Knight, that political assumption, that political belief gets tested more and more and more. With the way that mainstream news media and the offices charged with protecting the disenfranchised have, well, treated the disenfranchised, I would be inclined to look the other way if something bad were to happen to them. Oh, your offices were, I don't know, graffitied, assaulted, you know, one of your executives didn't feel safe going home? Well, tough shit. Maybe, like, do an actual job of reporting on the news of the day and sticking up for the people that can't stick up for themselves, instead of just, you know, keeping your head down so that you can get some more fucking investment capital from your donors. Jesus Christ. Like I said, I'm very angry right now. I really, you know what, I maybe I just don't have anything to say right now. Maybe I'm just too angry to say anything. Other than, you know, Eden Knight deserved better. She deserved justice, and she doesn't deserve the fucking media industrial complex that buried her in death. She doesn't deserve the goddamn infrastructure of the nation state that sort of led her by the nose into Saudi Arabia, where she didn't want to be, where she was tricked into being. What the fuck kind of world have we built? What the fuck kind of world is this? Are you kidding me? Let me try to come down from this. The crux of why I'm so angry here, the reason for it, is that this young woman was hung out to dry by everyone in her life except for the people, basically except for the friends that she had on Twitter, which is a very sad reality to be stuck in, right? She was hung out to dry by her parents, her family friends, that, you know, basically everybody that she knew in real life that had any sort of influence over the things that she did, hung her out to dry. And then her governments hung her out to dry. The United States had no qualms about, you know, not granting her asylum. Of course, the Saudi government hung her out to dry. And now, after she's dead, the news has hung her out to dry. She had literally nobody there to help her. And I don't mean to like say this of Merrick and all the trans community on Twitter, you know, who have been nothing but supportive of her up until her death. The reason I say this is because realistically, what power does the trans community have? In this country, in Saudi Arabia, the world over, what the fuck kind of power would the trans community have to stop something like this from happening when they're faced with the US government, the Saudi government, a highly influential family, 3 financial fixers, and a news media conglomerate, like group of conglomerates that is perfectly comfortable with not saying a single word on the subject? What do we do in the face of that? That's kind of a rhetorical question. I have an idea of what we can do in the face of that, but I feel like saying that might get me banned off of either Twitch or YouTube, so I'm, you know, maybe I'll abstain for now. Fucking makes me want to cry. I didn't even know her and it makes me want to cry. Tears of fucking a million different emotions, none of them good. Cut the segment for real. Just get it out of here, please.